This presentation on the future of quality auditing comes to us from Greg Hutchins, PE, the founder of Certified Enterprise Risk Manager CERM Academy. Greg's company was among the first companies in 1987 to provide audit training with one of the first ISO certification bodies in North America, AGA Labs, and was the first approved by the Department of Homeland Security for critical infrastructure protection, forensics, assurance, and analytics. His company has been conducting risk audits for 20 years. He is also the author of the books Value-Added Auditing, Risk-Based Auditing, Supply Chain Risk Management, and ISO 31000 2018. And with that, take it away, Greg.
Hey, Mike. Thank you. Kind words. Appreciate everything. I want to say thanks to Jane Bowler and to you. You're my boss / customer on this, so let's give it a shot. So we're going to talk about the future of quality auditing, something that's been very close to my heart for 25, even 30 years. So let's sort of get into this. So what's my background? We started actually with one of the first CB certification bodies in North America. The first CB was probably BSI, but the first North American CB was probably AGA Labs. And we did all their training, their consulting. Oh boy, going back to 1987 when ISO first came out. So here's a little bit more of a background. Written a bunch of books on ISO 9000. Where the authors of Value-Added Auditing, now it's in its 4th edition, probably the first and the best risk-based auditing book out there. But anyway, you can see who we are and what we do. So in this presentation, we're going to talk about 6 critical topics. The first is, what's the background of, or what's the state of quality auditing? What are the salaries of U.S. quality auditors and U.S. internal auditors? We're going to talk about the difference of quality auditing and internal auditing, and we're going to talk about why there's such a disparity in salaries. Then we're going to talk about how do audits add value, or in other words, to say, we're going to talk about risk-based audits, and then we're going to close out with the future of auditing. If you need to get a hold of me, my phone number is on the second slide, so just reach out to us. So we started talking with ASQ and actually writing about ASQ, the state of quality auditing, going back to March 2001. This was an article we wrote. It was the Quality Progress lead article. Actually, it was on the cover. So we've been involved with the standards, ISO 9001 since '87, and we've been involved with, well, the predecessor to 19,011 was 10,011, and we've been involved with that standard since 1990. So we've been involved with quality auditing and risk-based auditing for a long time. So we're going to basically set the context to this discussion by looking at salaries. I got the salary listing from Indeed.com. Indeed basically does headhunting. It's an online human resource website company. And I basically, about 2 weeks ago, on September 6th, Googled, what are the salaries of quality auditors? And this is basically what I got. 583 employees and users were surveyed. The average salary of a quality auditor was $11.87 an hour. That shocked me, just totally shocked me. The other thing that shocked me was the distribution. The distribution, salary distribution, which you can see on the slide, goes from $7.25 to $39.05 an hour. Um, and by the way, it was skewed to the right. And the average salary was really pretty low. I quite honestly thought the average salary would be in the $35 to $42 an hour range. So what's going on here? Um, I don't know, quite honestly. I can surmise, and I talked to a couple people, including my customer, because Mike Richmond, the publisher of Quality Digest, prior publisher of Quality Digest, said, this can't be. And I think what they're doing, what Indeed did, is they took the salaries of inspectors, a non-professional, non-degreed, non-engineering position, and lumped them in together with quality auditors. That's the only way I could see such a low salary. And quite frankly, it shocked me. So let's see, what do internal auditors make? Um, this is what surprised me. Internal auditors had a distribution of 28,000, 26,000 to 184,000. The distribution was a little bit skewed, but it basically followed a nice normal bell-shaped curve. The second thing that surprised me is that the average salary for an internal auditor in the US was $43 an hour, almost 4 times more than quality auditors make. Also, the sample was from a large population and it was fairly recent, according to Indeed, within 36 months. So, what's going on? This is what I'll try to explain in the talk and hopefully make some sense of it. If you look at the salary distribution also, see that the low is 26,000 and the high is 184,000. And why do you have that high salary? Well, in many companies now, we have something called chief risk officers. Um, Many of them started in the auditing function, but as they became an officer, a VP, the salaries increased. So that's one reason why we have a nicer distribution of data. So what's the good news? ASQ, American Society of Quality, has a number of professional auditor certifications. And this is the latest data that I could get. This is from 2017 Quality Progress Salary Survey. If you look at this auditor salaries for quality auditors, they range anywhere from quality improvement associates, 74,000, to pharmaceutical GMP professionals, making an average of 123,000. So again, why do we have a difference between the ASQ numbers and Indeed.com? And we'll probably, hopefully, explain that in the talk. Anyway, so let's talk first about what is the difference between a quality auditor and an internal auditor. This is the definition of an internal auditor that we picked off of their website. Internal auditing is an independent, objective assurance and consulting activity designed to add value and improve an organization's operations. It helps an organization accomplish its objectives by bringing a systematic, disciplined approach to evaluate and improve the effectiveness of risk management, control, and governance processes. Boy, is that a mouthful. But the important thing is that definition of internal auditing, again, I took that off the internal uh, auditor's website. That definition is really the definition of what quality auditing is migrating or emerging to. So let's take a look at what is quality auditing. I took this definition off 2011, 2018. Quality auditing, according to this, is a systematic, independent, and documented process for obtaining objective evidence and evaluating it objectively to determine the extent to which audit criteria are fulfilled. Old style definition. I've written a book on 19,011-2018. The whole standard, 46 pages, is really about risk-based auditing. And the prior definition that we talked about, internal auditing definition, is probably closer, much, much closer to what 19,011-2018 is moving to, and what what quality auditing is moving to. So what are critical differences between the internal auditing and quality auditing definitions? IIA is risk-focused, ISO is business-focused. But as I talked about, ISO 19,011-2018 is moving to risk-based auditing and is much, much closer to the IIA focus and definition. So let's talk about something really critical. Why is there a difference between US quality and internal auditor salaries? The IIA, the Institute of Internal Auditors, basically jumped on the bandwagon a number of years ago with something called the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, which basically requires every publicly held company to have an internal auditing department. Now, the feds, as of 2016, is requiring, the US federal government is requiring every federal agency and department to have a risk-based auditing system. So that's one big reason why quality and ISO are moving to risk-based auditing, because that's where the requirements are from the public authorities as well as other agencies, federal agencies. So just to fill out this definition, the SEC, Security and Exchange Commission, requires companies to have internal audit groups, which, by the way, are risk-based. And more importantly, the IIA, internal auditors, are already conducting effectiveness and risk-based audits. So let's look at the risk-based auditing drivers. The problem is shareholders, board of directors, and stakeholders don't want surprises. Or another way to say that, they don't want uncertainty, they don't want risk. ISO, probably about 7 years ago, saw that, and they decided to implement and adopt risk into first ISO 9001, then 14,001, and now all of their standards. And what I would call the what is standards, like 14,001, 9,001. These are standards that you audit against. So since the what is standards had risk requirements, it was really incumbent upon ISO to develop a risk auditing standard. And that's what they did. So last year, 2018, they developed ISO 19,011, 2018. And basically it's 46 pages, and you'll find risk on just about each page. So the problem that ISO saw was stakeholders in a company don't want uncertainty, surprises, or risk. And ISO basically said, we're going to put risk in all of our standards. ISO 19,011-2018 is all about risk-based auditing, specifically how to plan a risk audit, how to conduct a risk audit, how to report a risk audit. And I think, and I've been following the auditing standards for, since 1990, 29 years. I know ISO 19,011-2018 is the best standard that they've developed, that ISO has developed. Very comprehensive, and is really focuses on what companies want and need. So let's go back to our challenge. And I'm talking about the quality community. If you look at this chart, you'll see that a quality auditor or lead assessor will conduct an audit, management system audit, compliance audit, process audit, and report to a manager of systems auditing. And sometimes the audit will go to a quality director, sometimes to a VP of engineering operations. But on the right-hand side of this chart, you'll see that every company now, publicly held, and now government organizations, US federal government specifically, have a requirement that an internal audit group conducts risk-based audits, and those audits are sent to the chief financial officer, but more importantly, solid line directly to the board of directors audit committee. And this is our challenge. We're on the left side. Our audits go to a manager of systems auditing. And that's one reason why I think we've got a low salary in that Indeed.com profile survey. On the other hand, organizations, publicly held globally, are required to have an internal audit function, are mandated to have an internal audit function where the audits go directly to the board of directors. So think in terms of the value exchange. From the company's point of view, which audits are most valuable? Those on the left, the management system audits that go to a first line manager and sometimes are not acted on in terms of CAPA, corrective action, preventive action, or the audits on the right that are statutory, that go directly to senior management and go directly to the board. Obviously, the ones on the right are perceived to have more value. The ones on the right also are risk-based audits. So one of the few takeaways I'd like you to have on this talk is start doing planning, conducting, and reporting risk-based audits. You can call them management system audits, you can call them quality audits, whatever you do risk-based audits. Share that information with the VP of internal auditing and combine your reports for management systems. They could be 27001 IT, they can be environmental 14001 or 9001. But develop audits that satisfy the VP of internal auditing, the little box you see on the right, and share those audits with senior management and the board of directors. If you do that one thing, I'll guarantee you'll almost double your salary in 3 years. Let me say that again. If you do that one thing, conduct risk-based audits that the VP of internal auditors can combine with his or her audits and send to the board of directors, you will almost guaranteed double your salary in 3 years. Okay, so this is basically sort of an abbreviated version of what you saw on the previous slide. The VP of Internal Auditing will send his or her audits up to the Chief Financial Officer and solid line to the Board of Directors. These audits are 100% risk-based audits. They focus on the operational risk. They focus on management risk. If you combine your audits, management system audits, and consolidate them with the internal auditing, you'll double your salary, guaranteed. So we call this audit reporting, and we talked a lot about this already. Internal auditing reports go directly to the solid line to the board of directors. They'll go sometimes dotted line or solid line to the chief financial officer. Our audits will go to the quality head. And what I'm suggesting, or very strongly, is that your audits go directly to the head of internal auditing and go up to the board and to executive management. They'll have perceived more value and you'll make more money down the road. So risk-based audits, another way to say that, are audits that add organizational value. So I'm going to discuss about 6 types of risk-based auditing in terms of efficiency, effectiveness, cost reduction, risk management, and systems control. And these are the audits that I'll basically talk about over the next couple of slides. Compliance audits, process risk assessments, internal control assessments, attestation. And if you go back to that definition in the previous slide, you'll also see that internal auditing can provide consulting to the organization, internal consulting. Now, when you're providing consulting, you're no longer independent, you're objective. But that objectivity in terms of providing consulting could be Six Sigma, lean, operational excellence, adds operational value. And again, if it adds operational value, you'll make more money. So I want to also talk about assurance. The difference as you move down the bullets from compliance to attestation, compliance audits provide the audit customer, a lower form of value or perceived value. Another way to say that, compliance audits provide a lower level of assurance to the audit customer. On the other hand, internal control assessment, attestation, provide the audit customer, a higher level of assurance. And we'll talk about that with each slide. So the first type of value-added audit we're going to talk about is compliance. A compliance audit is basically binary. Yes, no. Yes, the company complies. No, it doesn't comply. If it doesn't comply, a CAPA, corrective action, preventive action, will normally be instituted. Compliance audits are basically lower quality audits, and they provide a lower level of assurance to the audit customer. Compliance audit can be a documentation review. It can be a management system review. Again, relatively low level of assurance to the audit customer. A higher type of assurance, and again, a higher level of assurance implies a higher value to the customer. More value, the more money you make. That's a direct correlation. And the highest types of value now are really risk-based audits. So if you provide risk-based audits and they're going directly to executive management or the board of directors, you guaranteed will make more money. So process audit is a higher level of assurance than a compliance audit. Again, a compliance audit is binary, yes, no. A process audit basically looks at a business objective, looks at the inputs to the process, looks at the process itself, and looks at the outputs. And do the outputs, the outcomes, do they basically match up to the objective requirements? If they do, that's great. If they don't, there's a delta, there's a risk, and that risk should be reported, and that risk should be mitigated. The next type of value-added audit is what I would call a risk assessment. There are many, many types of risk assessments. These are really not risk management audits, but they're risk assessments. And a very common type is what we would think of killer whales, orcas. The first point is to look at objectives, look at the risks, look at the mitigating controls of the risks, and make an assessment. Can the organization meet its business objectives? If it can't, then those risks need to be mitigated through additional controls or through other means, training, for example. The next type of audit we're going to discuss is internal control assessments. Again, the more we move into internal control, we're moving into the risk environment. So I'm going to talk about that for a second. Anytime you hear the word control and risk go hand in hand, just like bread and butter, good and bad, uh, uh, black and white. Anytime you hear the word control, there's going to be a risk. Why? Because the control is instituted to mitigate risk. Anytime you hear the word risk, automatically think of control. because those two concepts are like opposite sides of a coin. Um, you can't have one without the other. So, an internal control assessment implies that the organization has an internal control system, not on in one area, but really probably system wide or organization wide. And an internal control assessment basically looks at 5 elements. What's the control environment? What are the risk assessments? Do the control activities mitigate the risks? What's the information communications uh, control? And what type of monitoring, continuous monitoring, is being conducted in the organization to ensure that objectives are being met? The next type of assessment are self-assessments. In another talk, and this is probably premature because it'll take a long time, organizations now are developing self-assessments as a method to ensure that objectives are being met. Self-assessment, basically it means that the person doing the work, the area of function doing the work, is responsible for meeting objectives. So management, workers, people on the line will actually self-assess at the end of the day or periodically. Um, are objectives being met? Objectives can be um, operational stability. It can be control stability. It can be periodic inspection to an AQL, acceptable quality limit. It can be any number of things. But again, the assumption is like quality. The old the old adage about quality is that we're all responsible for the quality of our work. Well, self-assessment is sort of the other side of that. If we're all in quality, if we're all responsible for the quality of our outputs, then how do we assess that? And we can focus on process stability, capabilities such as CPKs, or improvement. Another form, and this is probably one of the highest forms of risk assessment or value assessment, is what's called attestation. Attestation is where a professional opinion is rendered by an auditor. A risk-based audit quite often is conducted. The auditor will provide a professional, what we call attestation or opinion, as to the effectiveness of the organization to meet its objectives, the effectiveness and efficiency of the controls to mitigate risks, and more importantly, ensuring that the organization, the enterprise, can do the same thing. If the enterprise controls are in place, which we call a system of controls, then the company, the customer, the ratepayer, the investor is assured that management is doing what it's supposed to do. And again, an attestation, a professional opinion, is a very high level of assurance. So basically, there are a few messages here that I want to convey in the talk. It's a rather short talk, but the idea is ISO 19011 2018 is a how-to standard, how to conduct an audit, and is one of the best standards that we've seen. And I've been involved with quality since 85. I've been involved with ISO since 87. And I really like the standard. And I believe that if you, the quality auditor, can migrate and conduct risk-based audits, your career is going to be ensured. So what's the future of auditing? I think it's great. Risk-based auditing, however, does have a few challenges. In compliance auditing, it's pretty much straightforward. You've got a shall requirement. Do you either meet that requirement or you don't? In a risk-based audit, it's much more open to interpretation. And what does that require? That requires a level of professionalism. In other words, a level of education, a level of capability, a level of knowledge, skills and abilities. And that's one reason why risk-based auditors make more money. If you get that skill set, knowledge, skills, and abilities, I can guarantee you'll be making a lot more money in 3 years. But risk-based audits can be open to interpretation. Why? Because they're simply not black and white. They're not compliance-based. Another challenge to risk-based auditing is what I would call inconsistent application. Um, one person's uh, or one leads, auditor leads method to gathering data, interpreting the data might be a little bit different than somebody else. And the outcomes, the results, the kappas that come out of it, out of different audits from different people, may be different. Again, these are not compliance-based. Compliance-based audits are largely black and white. There are a lot of shades of gray to risk-based auditing. That's one reason why the level of professionalism, the level of knowledge, the level of abilities for RBA, risk-based auditors, is higher. We talked about requiring more auditor skills. I'll give you a quick example. I looked at the predecessor to ISO 19011, 2018. The predecessor was ISO 10011 that came out in 1990. It was 5 pages long. 5 pages, 1990. The new standard, ISO 19011, 2018, is 46 pages. 46 pages. Very detailed, and again, risk-based. Risk-based auditors need a lot more process knowledge. You simply can't look at a process flow chart and say, yep, they got the chart, that's good enough. That's compliance thinking. Now, if you're going to do a risk-based audit and look at controls, you need to basically follow the process from beginning to end. Look at what we would call material inputs. Look at how the process is conducted. Look at process of variability. Look at control points. Look at how risks are being mitigated. And more importantly, throughout the process, see if objectives are being met. This requires a lot more process knowledge. And again, there's a possibility of variation. What type of variation? Variation between risk-based auditors. Why? Because risk-based audits are not black and white. They basically require professional expertise. And that's what you're going to be paid for if you decide to do those. So, my takeaways, and probably your takeaways, I hope. Risk is the language of the board and executive management. If you want to make more money, if you want to add value to the organization, you want to make a difference, speak the language of risk. Risk now is becoming the connecting theme and the common theme to all risk standards. For ISO 9011, 2018, risk is required in planning, conducting, and reporting the audit. So no risk, and speak the language of risk. ISO compliance and systems assessments will still be conducted, but I feel, that they're going to become less important as the years go by, and risk, the language of business, will become more important. The other thing is the word quality audit is fading from the ISO vocabulary. Again, it's simply going to be auditing and assurance. Get those two words, especially assurance, into your vocabulary. That's going to be really, really important. Risk-based auditing, at the end of the day, is value-added auditing, and we're going to see more of that. Know how to conduct the 5 or 6 audits that we discussed in this talk. Know them like the back of your hand. Have experience doing those in terms of planning, conducting, and reporting. And if you do that within 3 years, you'll see your income, your salary, your consulting increase, hopefully exponentially. Um, the other thing that we're going to see is you, as auditors, are going to be doing multiple audits for different stakeholders. Different stakeholders, different audit customers have different requirements. So you're going to have to become not only very familiar with 19011, but supply supplier audits, IT audits, cybersecurity audits. There are a lot of standards coming out, and we believe that more and more auditors will be making six figures within 2 or 3 years, especially if you can combine your ISO, your management system audits, with risk-based audits. One final thought on that one. The federal government is mandating every federal agency have an ERM, Enterprise Risk Management Program. The requirements coming out of the federal government for government contractors and second tier are all risk-based. And we've worked with probably 4 or 5 sectors within the federal government. And it's amazing the number of risk-based auditing opportunities that will be coming up in 2 years. So learn it and do it. Um, some more takeaways that we've seen over the last 5 years. The integration of quality audits with internal auditing. Why do we want to do that? So that our reports go to executive management and to the board of directors. We're going to evolve. Quality auditors are going to evolve into business auditors. In another way to say that, value-based auditors. I think auditor requirements, training requirements, learning requirements are going to increase. We're going to have a new risk-based audit structure. Now, what do I mean by that? Um, compliance audits you could normally do in maybe 2 or 3 days, person days. When you move into risk-based audits, where a lot more data needs to be gathered, a lot more evidence needs to be gathered. Why? Well, because stakeholders want a higher level of insurance. Why? To basically mitigate against that risk. Um, those audits take longer. So I'll give you a couple things we've learned. If we do a compliance audit, it'll take X amount of time. If we do a process audit, it'll take 1.5x. If we do a risk assessment, ORCA, Objective Risk Controls Assessment audit, it'll take 2x to 3x. If we do an internal controls, 5x. If we have to issue an opinion, 10x. What do I mean by 10x? We're a professional engineering company. If we have to provide an attestation and an opinion of a, say, nuclear power plant or something that deals with infrastructure, those type audits will take 5 to 10x longer and cost 5 to 10 times as much. Why? Because we have to issue an opinion where we're potentially legally liable. Also, through the audit, risk is being shared. And finally, if we're wrong, we're potentially liable. So, bottom line, we think the future looks great for risk-based auditing if you do the things that we suggested. Can we guarantee you'll double your income within 3 years? Well, if you're making $11 an hour, according to that Indeed survey, yes, we could probably say that if you do the things that we've talked about in this talk, you could probably quadruple your income. But let's say you're making, 15 bucks an hour, or 20 bucks an hour. If you do what we've suggested in this talk, I could, with a high degree of assurance, say you'll double your salary within 3 to 5 years. So with that, I think, what are next steps? Well, this is where shameless self-promotion comes in. We wrote this first book about 25 years ago, maybe 30 years ago. We think this is the best book around on risk-based auditing. It's called Value Added Auditing 4th Edition. You can find it on Amazon. And if you have questions, just give us a call or reach out to us. Our contact information is on the front end of the slide. Um, um, we also have a weekly newsletter on risk. If you go to sermacademy.com, you'll find almost 1,700 articles. Actually, it's insights.sermacademy.com. You'll find probably the biggest resource base of risk-based articles in the world, about 1,700 articles. And anyway, we appreciate your time and thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Greg Hutchins, for that exceptional look at the future of the auditing profession. And that concludes this presentation.